Hey everybody, this is Paul DeBeddings, known online as Minnesota Headhunter, and this is one of the first sort of interviews and chats I've been doing with friends here in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and leading up to Twin City Startup Week, and then also for SourceCon, which is a national recruiter conference that I'm off to in the middle of the week. And so I wanted to get my buddy Nick Roseth in on this. A couple of quick disclaimers. It says 10 minutes with. It was just an awkward title I picked up, and pretty much it's because it's never been 10 minutes with me in any conversation. Just like I assume this one will be 30. Nick's already smirking. This could go 30, it could go 50, but not much more than that. And of course, I'll put that in the notes so that when you start hitting play, you know what you're in for. The other part is that we're still getting used to the video system, and so if it gets a little quirky or hiccupy, we're just not going to worry about it. We click record and we click stop at the end, so there's no editing. So whatever Nick or I say that might be stupid, you can go ahead and use that against us later on. So Nick, thanks for hanging out with me and doing this. Instead of me giving some sort of like crappy lead in like who you are and what you do and whatever, like why don't you just kind of fill me in, fill everybody else in on like what your story is?
Sure. So a little bit about me is by day, I help run a company in town called SWAT Solutions doing software testing. By night, I've been working on a project called Documentary for the past year and a half. Career-wise, overall, I spent my first 5 years in creative, the next 5 years in more technical and coding, and then probably about the past 10 years in more tech leadership of creative and tech companies.
So what are you on, like version 3 or 4 of you now?
Yeah. Let's call it version 3. Maybe
Okay.
maybe 4 is down the road.
Yeah. And how do we find you online? So I know you're on LinkedIn. So what's your Twitter and then what's the URL for the documentary?
Yep. So my Twitter handle is just Nick Roseth, last name Roseth. The documentary is online at documentary.com. You can see the trailer there, and then after our big release coming up, we'll be able to see the full film.
So let's just get the documentary part of it. So much of your past, what, 12, 15 months, whatever it's been. And then our conversations have been around the Minnesota tech scene and documentary. Just how does it feel to be a couple of days away from this premiere? Like, are you sleeping now?
Yeah, strangely enough, I'm actually sleeping a lot better this week than I was probably 3 months ago. So I'm in the, I kind of liken it to the eye of the storm, where things are relatively calm, surprisingly calm, and just trying to batten down, the last of the details. One of the best things I did was definitely to get an event coordinator to help me from having complete, panic attacks.
So this is why you look rested and relaxed.
Right. I've made as much of this as possible somebody else's problem. So, and she has done a phenomenal. So she has helped me sleep at night.
So while we're thinking about that, before we get into the documentary part, I know that you've done, 90% of the workload on this, but who are some of the folks sort of behind the scenes who've been lending a hand and doing some of the video work, or just even in general, just like who's been helping you along the way?
Yeah. So this is really the culmination of hundreds of people backing this thing for the past year and a half. Some key folks out there. Casey Allen has been tremendous. He has answered more emails than any human should have on this project. Yourself has been a good proponent in the community. Chip Pearson was an early supporter who has been phenomenal. Great support. The event coordinator, Mary Lou Wicklash from Click Talent, helping out on the event side of things. There's so many people, the sponsors, Target and Minnesota Cup and Ministar. There really are literally too many organizations and people to list. But those are a few folks that come to mind.
I guess I haven't, you and I've had a number of conversations over a period of time. How many hours do you think you put in on this thing? Do you even want to know?
Let's see here. So what do they say? Full-time job is 2080, generally as a rule of thumb per year.
Yeah.
So I would say it was probably a half-time job. So if we had to extrapolate, I would have to say somewhere in the 14 to 1600 hours, maybe more. Been kind of a lot.
Is this the part where we should be thanking your wife too?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Probably more so than anybody. My wife Val, putting up with my shit for the past year and a half is probably the real reason this project is actually finishing.
Is she going to be there that night?
Oh, absolutely.
Good. Um, I was just going to ask if you were going to do anything special for her, but if you aren't, then you should. And if you are, don't tell me now. Wait for her later.
Yeah, yeah.
um, uh, so back to Thursday, or so back to the premiere itself. Like, when is it? Where is it? What's some of the logistics still that need to be worked out, if anything?
Yeah, so it's at McNamara Alumni Center on the U of M campus. We're right after the Minnesota Cup, and if nothing else, it should be interesting to watch. Probably somewhere between 400 people walk out of McNamara at the same time. 300 to 400 people are walking into McNamara because there's about a 1 hour happy hour. So we'll have food trucks. We'll
Oh,
have bars. We've got a VIP room. And then basically Minnesota Cup ends at 7. Drinks and food, 7 to 8. And then 8 o'clock, we start the program. The program's going to include about 10, 15 minutes of speeches. And then we roll the film, which is about 45 minutes, wrapping everything up at about 9 o'clock. And then shut the place down around 10. So stay after for drinks and some pretty good networking. I think we're going to have a pretty awesome cross section of the tech community here in Minnesota.
you could see my facial reaction now hearing. I mean, I've known what was going to be going on for this event, but that I'm going to have to fly out and miss it. It's freaking breaking my heart, dude. It sucks.
I
Um,
was hoping to try to get some local beer, like Surly's right down the road. There's just a bunch of
yeah.
regulations and stuff that you have to go
Um,
through. So the pulling the beer community into it was one thing I did not was not able to accomplish.
uh, Again, months ago when you and I were talking about what if you were to hold it at this venue, what if you were to hold it at that venue, and do we think? And you kept saying, well, what if I could get that many people? And I'd be like, but geez, well, like, what happens if you don't? Which is not like me to be like the naysayer, right? And you're like, well, what if we do it at this place? And I'm like, crap, if you could get that many people, that would be awesome. So talk to me a little bit about what could the attendance be on premiere night.
So right now we have we're just a little over 600 registrations.
Oh,
So
that's
I
so
think
cool.
we should end up over 500. So there's actually 500 seats there. So maybe we'll end up with a little standing room only. We'll see. But with the Minnesota Cup, people hanging out afterwards and networking and whatnot, I think we should definitely be over 500, which is super awesome.
You busted your ass, friend. I'm really proud of you. This is cool. Um,
Yeah.
let's go back to the beginning then. So, like, what the hell were you thinking? Why'd you do this? What was on your mind?
Yeah. I think everybody kind of feels the tech talent shortage, and I've definitely been watching it in this community for the past 5 years or so. And so I started kind of engaging with groups like MHTA, Minnesota High Tech Association, and going to check out mini demos and that kind of stuff, and just seeing how cool the community is. And so, the journey kind of started. Uh, I have a rough estimate of exactly how many days. 542 is to be precise. Um, so Tech Cities events brought LinkedIn to talk about our tech talent shortage. They actually put numbers to it. So I was like super interested in that. And then a couple weeks later at Mini Bar, there was a really interesting talk about the brand of Minnesota, and a lot of really great leaders in town talking about what we've got going on. And somebody had said something to the effect of, "We're doing really cool stuff. We're just not telling our story." And so,
Was that
like,
was that the one in the Best Buy theater when I officially started my anti-North cold campaign?
that is correct. Eric Dayton, Ryan Broshar, Carson Kipper from Sport Engine, and really interesting conversation, and just to see
Yeah.
the passion in the community talking on that level. And then the next morning, I literally just woke up with the idea of like, hey, let's do this. And so that's what sparked the journey of trying to address how do we fix our tech talent shortage, because it impacts all different layers of the economy here. And the idea was that we need to do a better job of telling our story.
So you just decide I'm going to go like be a documentary guy, like what
Yeah.
do
So
you,
at the same
like what was that part of the logic to it?
Okay, so life doesn't happen. Generally speaking, life doesn't happen in like these big moments. There's a series of moments. So a few weeks earlier, I was at the Minnesota High Tech Association. They had something like called like Tech, MN Tech, or something along those lines. There was a conference, and so at that event, I actually met a videographer and kind of creative filmmaker here in town named Eric Jensen. And so I grabbed lunch with him. He wanted to connect. I wanted to connect and just talk about storytelling, that kind of stuff. And then so at the same time I had this idea, I thought this would be the best vehicle to get this message to a broader audience. I happen to hang out, know this guy. And then the third component would be that I happen to be in the ACE leadership program for Minnesota High Tech Association, and I needed a project to do. And so rather than do, one of their preset projects, I came up with this idea and I pitched it to the group, and I ended up getting the biggest group in the cohort. So that created some validation. So there was like literally hundreds of micro decisions that led into this larger decision to push this thing forward. And then once I got that community support, it was off to the races.
I keep smiling because I just think about all the things that kind of have fallen in place. Maybe not always easy over the last year and a half, or what would you say, 500, how many days?
142 days, I'm sticking with that number.
Like this has been a series of like some happenstances and some timely conversations for you, and then like just hell yeah, let's go.
Yeah. So I'd say this is, before anything else, before it's a Nick project, I'd say it's a community project, because when I went along the way, I got a lot of really good ideas from a lot of really smart people, way smarter than I am. So that's been fortunate. And then ideas like stand up a Kickstarter, and then Kickstarter as a way to create visibility, run around Startup Week, and tell everybody that what's going on. And so then getting some sponsors on board, Target coming on board after meeting with me literally one time was insane, completely crazy. So that kind of momentum and that push that really kept me going. It's one of those things where it's like running a marathon. And so it was a really hard journey. I'd say the first, my theory is that adrenaline will get you 3 months through 3 months of just about anything. So
Yeah.
I've been in some pretty interesting and tough situations in the past, 5-10 years. And the first 3 months, like parenthood, 3 months, you get through the first 3 months, and then you realize how miserable your life is. And then you kind of dig out of that from there. But I'd say the first 3 months was adrenaline, a lot of community support. And then once the real work started, then it starts to really get hard and drag on. And so I'd say that the past year and a half has been like a marathon. And the hardest part in a marathon, the part where most people give up, is at mile 21. And it's because you're so far away from the start and you still can't see the finish. That was definitely the hardest part. So having folks in the community, yourself included, to go have a beer with and talk about how challenging that things can be when you take on something of this magnitude. Casey Allen, like I said, Casey and Chip have been there as much moral support as anything in terms of bouncing ideas around. They've just been more of like understanding kind of this entrepreneurial journey and this effectively a startup I've put together for the past year and a half. So a lot of challenges along the way. So in terms of how I'm feeling now, it's like it's kind of being able to see the finish line, and then looking at it also as one door closing and another door opening.
We'll talk a little bit about that in a couple minutes. So thank you, you sent me a link to the documentary, last week, So I got a chance to take a look at it. And I texted this to you, but I remember saying you and I had a conversation a long time ago. Like, I don't remember how long ago. And I was going to look at my email to figure out when was the first time you and I spoke, but I didn't get a chance to even. Because it feels like I've been a pain in your ass for about 5 years now, but I'm guessing it's only about 2 or a year and a half, whatever it is. But you asked me a long time ago, like, Paul, like, what would you want this thing to look like from a recruiting perspective and from a branding the technology perspective? And I remember I rambled, and I gave you a bunch of like incoherent thoughts, and you were probably rolling your eyes at me, like you usually do. But I sent that text the other day, like, dude, this is what I wanted. Not as if like this is what Paul would want, right? But it wasn't about me, but in the sense of what would I want to be able to show to folks locally who don't know about the tech scene, regionally who aren't sure about Minnesota, and then nationally for folks who don't have a clue. Like, dude, you nailed this thing. You gave the history of our tech scene, where we're at, what's going on, the good stuff, took care of some of the misconceptions, right? We don't really actually hug snowmen year round, like most people think. I like that you broke it up so that people can take bits and pieces of the documentary, so you don't have to show someone the full 45 or whatever it's going to be. There are these bits and pieces. So recruiters, hiring managers, companies can say to Nick, who could be a developer in Seattle, go watch this one piece. This is our lifestyle. This is about the weather, right? The misconceptions about the cold stuff. You nailed it. I mean, seriously, like I can't, just well done, dude.
I appreciate that. I will tell you right now that one of the moments where the thing got really difficult was literally sat down with Eric Jensen, the videographer on the project, and we went to dinner and we started talking about editing strategy. And because this is my baby, this is my vision, I had to be the one really to drive the story. And so,
yeah.
So that, I'd say, mile marker 12 to mile marker 23, I affectionately refer to as a period in my life known as the Valley of Death. It is quite a march through editing hell.
Oh shit!
We started with over 30 hours of content. That's just the interviews.
Hey, so wait, pause. Let me cut in for a second. So as part of what you're saying, so talk a little bit about like how many people did you interview in total, and some of those folks are who were in it. So weave that into this part if you can.
So once we got some funding together, we set out to interview 20 people, and as you know me pretty well at this point, that number quickly went to 60 people. So we actually interviewed, I think it was like 58 people over the course of about 3-4 months, and each one, would go from half an hour to an hour in some cases. There's just so many people with so many interesting perspectives. Like talking to some of the investors, like the investors were some of the most interesting people to talk to because they really have this very high level view, and I love high level pictures, and they look at every little detail in our ecosystem. So those were a lot of fun, but the big challenge in terms of editing is you have 1,800 minutes of footage, and I could listen to some of these guys talk about. I could watch a documentary series on Minnesota, at 10 episodes, an hour each, and I love that kind of shit. But
you're messed up, dude.
Try to compress it down to 5 minutes is extraordinarily challenging. So I literally, in terms of the history, it would take 2 hours of footage and compress that into 5 minutes. Really difficult. So that was kind of that part of that editing hell. And I think we did a pretty good job of making it bite-sized enough and chunking it the way that we did, so that you can come to this website and say, okay, well, I want a high-level overview of all things Minnesota Tech, and I can get that in under an hour. Or I'm just going to go check out what's going on with I'm interested in a little bit about the history, or I'm interested a little bit about kind of like what are the hot companies going on right now? How would I plug into Minneapolis if I were to go there during startup week or that kind of stuff? So it was a really challenge to try to entertain and educate folks at the same time. So So I'm confident that I think we did a decent enough job to make it a cool story, because we really just have a really cool story. And again, at the end of the day, the editing was a major challenge, but it's because we just had so much cool material to work with. And the way I liken it is, if you open a jigsaw puzzle box that has 500 pieces, and the minute you put that last jigsaw puzzle piece into place, and then you look over and you realize you still have 3,000 pieces left. That's kind of how it felt.
Knowing what you know now, I just keep laughing because I still can't believe that not that you pulled it off, but this hasn't been simple, right? Would you do it again knowing what you know now?
I would do it a little different, but I think in terms of the impact and like the crowd, the community support rallying behind it, people saying we need to do this, I think it's totally worth it. But there are definitely some things that I would do a bit differently.
So thank you for sending some of my parts. Well, how cool were the outtakes and the flubs and the mess ups? Like you could probably do 25 minutes on that alone, right? Just with people screwing up.
So I actually did, and I decided not to use it. I have a
Oh,
whole outtakes. I have a whole outtakes. It is freaking awesome. But lots of f bombs, lots of what I think is really fun type thing, but not necessarily something that everybody's going to want in front of 500 people. So that was going to be my closing credits, to do something really fun like that. But there's a lot of really cool material. And again, these are all extraordinarily smart people, that are able to articulate things in a very specific way, and it doesn't always happen that way. So you kind of end up with these um, very human moments, which I think is awesome.
so I've got an idea that I just thought about on the fly. Sometime in October, now that I've got a place with a party room, maybe we should have an evening, have a happy hour, and say, hey, I interviewed. Maybe this is a way we could thank folks, right? Hey, we're gonna do a happy hour and some just pizza or whatever. We're gonna show the outtakes. You might want to come see this.
That'd be fun. Absolutely, that'd be very cool.
I just think that'd be a cool idea. Talk to me about what didn't go right. Like, not failure in that sense, right? But did you ever hit delete by accident? Did you ever how many F bombs did you drop over the 542 days, if I have the number right?
Uh, I never actually deleted anything. So there was a moment. There was a moment of concern. Actually, it was I think it was your footage, you and Chad, when I work. There was a moment where I was on a call with Eric, the videographer, talking about how he lost or deleted all of that footage, and just about sent me into a complete panic attack. So fortunately, we're able to actually find that content. But as you can imagine, once you record this stuff, it's extraordinarily important. So looking back, like I really should have done a much more massive job. I have the hardware that I've put this thing together on is absolutely amazing. I have a MacBook Pro 2012 15-inch that I've like had to soup up the hard drive and the memory and all that stuff. But this thing has been a total champion. Like it's amazing this machine is still going. And a external like half terabyte little tiny hard drive about the size of your phone,
Mm-hmm.
and not like big, not like massive SAN storage, right? Like I don't know what I'm doing. So to do it over again, I would have had 42 backups of this thing running concurrently. But like literally, there's points where it's just like, okay, better copy these files. And now they're in all sorts of locations, but there are definitely some moments of concern of like, if this thing were to delete right now or you get run over by a car, this very bad things would happen. So there's some of those types of moments. I think that along the journey, there just were a lot of things that were a little more hard than I thought they were going to be. So like once Target came on board, they figured, oh man, this should be pretty big and everybody should really get behind it. And so continuing to try to find sponsors for the project was really, really hard. And I totally get it. It's challenging. It's an untested project and that kind of stuff. So raising money was harder than I thought, but I think that's true of any startup.
Yeah.
getting through the story, I spent a lot of time going down a lot of rabbit holes around the story because, I am a aspiring storyteller, and I think you can tell a story in a lot of different ways. But in terms of how to, again, the challenge of how do you make it entertaining and educational at the same time, super challenging. So I studied a lot on different storytelling mechanisms and talked to a lot of people. A lot of filmmakers actually, and we talked about different ways of doing it. But that created a ton of time that was spent scripting through ideas, trying to figure out how do we tell the story, and ultimately a lot of editing time. So in terms of what I would do over differently is definitely leverage that knowledge that I've come across over time from smarter people to say, here's a much more strategic approach to how we do the story side of it. And in the same vein, I would have gotten more people on board earlier to help in some way. Like I said, this is a community project and a lot of people helped, but it would have been much better to get professionals on board earlier with things like marketing, because so much, I mean, everything was on my shoulders. And that was really, really, really challenging. And as a startup, that's just kind of what you have to deal with. So whether I was starting a brand new company or a project like this, you're doing all the marketing, you're doing all the selling, you're doing pretty much everything. So I would have definitely benefited. My sanity would have benefited by having professionals come on board. But of course, that was a problem with raising money. If I had more money, I could have hired more professionals to do more of the work. But because we were only able to raise, a certain amount of money, Eric and I ended up having to do a lot more than we initially had anticipated. So what should have been a budget we had, I think that it would have taken about 3 times the budget to do a good job of this if we were both being paid decently. Um, but I think what we came out with was still a very good product at the end. So there are a million things that I would have done differently and changed, and a lot of failures along the way. But it was a hell of a learning journey.
So let's go back to some of the folks. So who did you talk to, or some of the individuals, but also just their backgrounds? So I know you talked to like the CEOs and investors and an okay average recruiter. And then so some of the who, but also like what were the themes that came out of this? Like what what was affirmed or confirmed that you already were thinking, and what did you learn that made you go, oh crap, I didn't know or think of that?
So the themes, and you can kind of see it as it's broken up in the film and online. It really kind of goes back to, let's talk about our history. Uh, let's talk about the community at a high level. Let's talk about the momentum and kind of this transformation. So I've been really fortunate to watch this ecosystem evolve over the past, couple of years, and really talk to really, really smart people, and how do we evaluate how it's evolving. And I think that the evolution of the ecosystem is happening very quickly, and um, I kind of see this transformation happening. So you think about Target and Techstars, which is they're doing their pitches today, which is super cool. And you think about some of these other big companies engaging, and the problem that I thought when I remember thinking in that discussion of the brand of Minnesota was, hey, we got this problem. We have all these big companies that aren't that engaged in our local tech uh, community. And so I think over the past couple of years, you see more and more of those big companies because truth be told, we don't have Amazon or Apple or Microsoft. We don't have that big powerhouse um, here anymore. So it's up to these big companies. And I thought it was really cool that Target's taken a leadership position and moving forward and saying, we need to do a better job of embracing our startup community, because that's what's going to lead to a healthy community, and we need to innovate and try different things. So you see more of these big companies doing that, and so I think that we're definitely in this period of transformation or momentum right now. So that part was really cool. But the community and the people in this community are really, really kind of the most amazing component to this. There's a lot of different stories with how cool all the amenities we have here, but people on this journey to come support me on this project have been absolutely amazing. So like I said, the history, the community, the organizations, the companies, the people, and then trying to really educate and push this idea of telling our story are some of the themes that came out of this, and some of the themes we'll be pushing on Thursday.
So what are some of those? I know we've busted it down a bit, right? You talk about like mini bar, mini demo, beta.mn. You talk about the history. You take on the cold sort of conversation. Like what are some of the other ones?
The other, so like, we talk about, a little bit about MHTA Startup Week, trying to draw some visibility to that. But yeah, trying to push against this misperception. Every story needs some sort of a villain or conflict. And in the early ideation phase of this, it was really ignorance and misperception is the conflict of this story. And so we set out right away to address and say, look, people outside of Minnesota have no idea how awesome it is here. And I liken that to a good microcosm of that in our community is like mini demo. And so I hadn't been to mini demo until like mini demo 20. And I got there and I was completely blown away by like, this is in our community. So one of the early kind of metrics that I tell people or started to formulate through this process was, if you haven't been to mini demo, you don't know how awesome mini demo is. And so I'd say the same thing about Minnesota. If you haven't been to Minnesota, you have no idea how awesome Minnesota is. We are a best place to work in so many categories. And I was just trying to get people here to appreciate more what we've got going on here, create some awareness and ways to engage in the community here locally, so that if you're graduating from Carlson, that you don't have to go to California to go join a startup. We have a ton of awesome startups here. And if you're outside of Minnesota, realize that you don't have to move to California where you can't afford it anyways, that you can come check out Minnesota and see what a vibrant community we've got going on here.
So I got kind of a run-on question. It's kind of putting two of them together now that I think about it. So why is it important to share our story? But even then past Thursday. So how do we continue to get the message out? How do we continue to promote our tech community? Because, and I hope I phrased my question the right way, because I know you'll take it the right way, but for others, like, so now what? Like, it's great that we've gotten this far. You've done a fantastic job. We've got this tool. Now what do we do with it? And then what's next after that?
Yeah, so I think that there's a couple, to start with, it's important to share our story because in order for us to grow, we need more people to join this community. We have a real concern in the sense of STEM education numbers. We don't have enough people getting into tech careers. And so this shortage is, it's actually kind of, it's two factors. It's part of it is the momentum towards technology. And part of it is just as we grow as a community, we need to do a better job of getting folks interested in tech careers. It's kind of a direct impact of our success leading to more success. But then suddenly we use up all the fish in the pond. And so what we want to do is we want to make a bigger pond. And so it's important to tell our story because we need more people there. So if there's 50,000 in tech right now, we need 100,000. So we need more people to engage, to be a part of that. They're great careers. It's a great way of life. So part of it is just to try to educate, create that awareness so that we can keep making Minnesota a awesome place to live, an awesome economy, keep growing. And we're very humble about ourselves, and we focus really hard on building really awesome companies, as you can see by our Fortune 500s here. But we need to do a better job of telling our story and get more vocal so that people here realize what we have, they appreciate it, and that people outside of here actually know our story. And we're not just cold flyover territory, that we actually have a lot of really cool things. And part of that is California is very consumer driven. We've always been very business to business driven. But I think you're starting to see that change where we're building more B2B companies that engage with consumers and some more B2C companies. So I think that's a super important reason in terms of why we need to tell our story to continue to grow what we have. In terms of what's next, I've created this as this tool is this community tool, and so a way to engage and show others what's going on in our community. And the next big important step is for people to use that tool to help get it out there. And we need to find ways to get this message into schools, whether it's high schools or colleges. We need ways for our companies to use it. And so my message to companies is, recruit outside of Minnesota, try to get folks engaged in schools, tell people about your company, but say, oh, by the way, here's also our community, which is a super important factor in your career. And how much support do you have? What are the opportunities? If this doesn't work, where else can I go? And so it's really critical for us as individuals to help share this story, get our story out there, and definitely the companies helping to spread the word by sharing the story of the larger economy. Because if somebody comes here to work at Target, they might go to Sport Engine, and vice versa. They might come here or stay here for lead pay, but Target, their lifestyle might change, and they might want to go to Best Buy. So it's again, we have to add water to the pool, and we're not going to be able to do that unless we do a better job of sharing our story. In terms of what's next for me, I think it's going to be continuing on with tech evangelism in general, kind of seeing where this project goes now overall. But I'd say the next 3 to 4 months for me are going to be things like screenings, try to get this word in front of companies, and just kind of bang the drum for getting people to be more vocal at the individual level, at the company level, and then seeing if there's ways through the media to get this story in front of as many eyeballs on this planet as possible.
So you had an article with Lee Schaefer in the Star Tribune a couple of weekends ago, and I'll make sure when I put this on the blog post, I'll add these links. So you had Lee wrote a really good article on you in the Star Tribune, and then you had an interview on WCCO, so local CBS radio with Rashini last week. And you did mention the whole tech evangelism piece. And you and I have had a couple of these conversations, both my path, your path, that we need some more vocal folks in our community. Talk to me a little bit about that, though. How does one break out of our? I think there's a number of us who do a really good job of promoting the community. We suck at promoting ourselves, right? So if I can promote you and you can promote me, we'll all be good. How do we get more of us?
So I think, part of that is spreading the story. Why is this place interesting? What is the cool stuff we're doing? I think technologists particularly, they are so interested in the work itself. And some of the amenities are going to be great, right? So if you're a big camper, or if you're a skier, some of those things are going to be great. But ultimately, when I go to work at one of these big companies or one of these small companies, what am I going to be doing? So I think it's important for everybody just to participate in our local communities and connect with others. I mean, the idea of co-working as a big catalyst, or the idea of mini demo as a catalyst, is the fact that it brings people together. And once you bring people together, you have these collisions. And Seth Levine from the Foundry Group talked about co-working as what he called Boyle's Law. Yeah. His idea is you have all these particles bouncing into each other, and if you increase the pressure, then you start to increase, heat and boiling, and really that's where ideas come together. So I think that anything we can do to grow the community and growing people, changing the perception of what tech is. Tech today isn't NASA in the 60s, right? It's a very different community. We need to focus more on diversity and inclusion and different ideas coming in. And it's not just you have to go and get a 4-year comp sci degree at the university. It's, there's positions in project management, creative roles. There's a lot of different pathways into our tech community now. And I think that one of the big challenges is that people don't necessarily identify as part of the tech community, but they need to reevaluate that perception. They need to start to consider themselves as part of the tech community, because the reality is that in today's economy, all companies are tech companies, and people need to remember that and find ways to engage with the community to basically say, well, I'm in retail. Well, you're in retail, but there is a technology component, whether you touch it or not, and we need to find ways to get that story out there more, to get more people to identify as technologists.
I don't want to take up much more of your time because I know you've got a busy day too. But there's sometime on Thursday evening. I hope that you take the lady's hand and you just remove yourself for a moment. You just stop and you look around and you say, "Well done."
I hope so. As we talk many times, it's much easier to give that advice than to take it. But I think I will try to breathe deeply and take it all in, because it has been a hell of a journey, and I'm so grateful for the community support, and I'm super excited about what's going to happen on Thursday, and then what's going to happen after that.
You're a good man, Nick. Thanks for hanging out with me.
Appreciate it, Paul. Thanks a lot. I look forward to continuing the discussion with anyone and everyone on the other side of this thing.
Oh, wait. So how do people get in touch with you besides the website? Like, what's an email address or something that they can send you a note?
Sure. So nick@documentary.com. There's a contact form on the website, LinkedIn. I'm pretty accessible, and I'm sure we're going to spark a lot of interesting conversations on post Thursday.
Cool. All right, brother. You have a good night. Enjoy that evening.
Thanks, man. You too.
All right.
Appreciate
See
it.
you, buddy.